All right, guys, we're not in my garage for another video, and today we are going to be talking about control arms. I know a lot of you guys are interested in upgrading your control arms because you've reached out to me and asked, what control arms are best, which ones would I go with, and then I know I completely throw a wrench in your plans when I ask, why do you want to upgrade your control arms? And everybody pretty much gives me the same kind of generic answer. I want to improve my handling. It's just kind of this idea. You see people on the internet say control arms are better for improved handling, so everybody wants to do it. But you guys know how I like to do things. I want to be really methodical with how I make my decisions and understand what changes I'm making and why, so I'm spending my money wisely and getting the benefits that I'm looking for. So in this video, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about control arm upgrades and why you might want to upgrade your control arms. And this hopefully gives you a little better idea before you place an order for any new parts. So we'll talk about it in this video, and hopefully you guys find it useful. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. So control arms are probably one of the most important aspects of your suspension that we just don't really talk about. Pretty much everybody focuses on springs and shocks. You either want lowering springs or coilovers so that you can lower your car and make this whole chassis feel stiffer so that you feel like you have better handling and performance. But control arms are really critical to how your suspension works, because imagine if you didn't have control arms at all. As your wheels go up and down along your suspension travel, there would be no control over what your wheels were doing. And so it's really key to make sure that you have good control arm design to make sure that you know exactly what your wheels are doing and it's doing what the engineers want it to do for handling, performance, drivability, and things like that. So in my case, I upgraded to the SPL control arms, and I posted a video several years ago about it. I highly recommend them. I'll put a link down in the description, and let them know I sent you if you decide to go that route. But I'm going to give you guys a couple of reasons why I recommend the SPL control arms over basically any other upgrade. So first of all, they replace the bushings, and I have my stock control arm here so I can show you what I'm talking about. But the stock bushings on our cars are rubber. So it's pretty soft, it's cheap, so that works great for the OEM. It's quiet, it's pretty maintenance free, it lasts for a good amount of time, and it's really comfortable. Again, going back to coilover suspension, most of what you feel going through potholes you associate with your springs. But a big portion of it also goes through these bushings, and any sort of, turning, heavy acceleration, heavy braking, all of that is putting forces on this bushing that need to be absorbed. Otherwise, you'll feel it in the steering wheel and kind of in the cabin. So going with these rubber bushings kind of just makes the whole drive feel softer and more comfortable. But that's not necessarily what we want from a performance aspect. So if you step up to an SPL control arm, you'll see that it has a solid spherical bushing. And this bushing is key to basically optimizing your drivability by reducing any deflection that you would experience in that rubber bushing. So normally, like I said, when you're braking really hard, going through turns really hard, and you would have all these forces pulling on this bushing, you're losing some of that feel in the steering wheel. It's going to feel more numb and less responsive. With a spherical bearing, you're basically going to have everything directly transmitted to the wheel and to the steering wheel. So all of your inputs will directly correspond to an output and a change in how the car is driving. So that's really important, and I think that's something that I highly recommend to a lot of people. I know a lot of guys say it's not great for daily driving, and it can potentially create a little more noise, but the SPL bushing design is actually self-cleaning. So it's not something that you have to worry about getting a bunch of dirt and gunk in it and things like that. As you go through your driving and your suspension goes up and down, it's naturally going to keep that bearing clean so that it lasts as long as possible. But it is still a maintenance item, and they do sell replacement parts in case you need to replace it down the road. Another aspect of your control arm that you might want to modify is the length. And so the length of your control arm controls the position of the bottom of your wheel. Now, if this is longer, it can push your wheels farther out, and that increases your track width. So naturally, that helps improve stability and makes the car feel a little bit more responsive as well. But another big aspect is it increases camber. And I know camber kind of gets a bad name because a lot of people, associate camber with these stance kids that lower their cars way beyond any reasonable amount. But the good news is camber is really important for traction and handling as well. The reason is because if you actually had zero camber, which, common misconception, but you do not want zero camber. Most people try to reduce it as much as possible. But the problem is if you had zero and you went through a turn, your whole car is going to lean, including your wheel and tire package. So as it rolls over, you're actually going to be riding on that outside edge of the tire, and the whole thing is going to lift up, which minimizes how much grip you have. You're going to basically take your tread off of the ground and have a lot less stability as you're going through a turn. If you have some camber, then when the car turns, it's going to basically square up your tires. So now you have a nice flat contact patch that's fully in contact with the pavement, and you have as much grip as possible. So increasing your camber generally allows you to get through a turn faster, which improves your handling, improves your lap times, and things like that. Now, the only downside to keep in mind here is on xDrive cars, this can put a risk on snapping your front axles. So for example, on F30 cars, a lot of guys like to put on the F80 control arms from the M3 and M4 because they are slightly longer and increase your camber. But if you have an xDrive F30, it can damage your axles. It pretty much will damage your axles. So that's not necessarily something that I recommend. I know on the G20 side of things, a lot of guys say, well, G80s come with a rear wheel drive and an xDrive version. So maybe I can put the G80 xDrive camber arms on my G20 xDrive and it'll work. In theory, it should. I haven't seen anybody try it. I'm not sure I would myself, but that is something to consider if you're going down that route. Now, again, I think the SPL arms are king here simply because they're not just longer, but they're actually adjustable. So they start at the stock length, but there's a screw that you can use to extend it and increase the track width on each side individually, depending on your goals. So if you do have a rear wheel drive car, you can extend it. Even if you have an xDrive car, technically you can extend it slightly without making it as long as an F80 control arm. I'm not sure how much I would play with that on an xDrive car. And even on my car, it's rear wheel drive, but I keep it at the stock length. But that is something that you can take advantage of if you have the tools and the appropriate equipment to take advantage of it. Also keep in mind, if you make it too long, it can shift your caster forward. So the whole wheel is going to move forward inside of the wheel well, and that can potentially cause rubbing issues with, your wheel hitting the fender and stuff like that. So you'll typically want to upgrade other parts of your suspension to move the wheel back center and just keep everything square. So yeah, another reason why I kept mine at stock length, just keep that in mind. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about is roll center. And this is probably one of the most important aspects of your handling that nobody understands or talks about really. And the good news is the SPL control arms also help with that as well. So the way that your roll center works is it's basically a point in space on your car. Just like your center of gravity, most people know how that works, and they want to lower their car, do whatever they can to lower their center of gravity as much as possible. Now, roll center is another point, and the relationship with the center of gravity is when you look at the distance between the two, that dictates how much body roll you'll have. So if your roll center is down here and your center of gravity is up here, every time you go through a turn, that center of gravity is going to rotate around the roll center. It rolls around the roll center. Now, if you raise that roll center up or lower that center of gravity down and basically reduce that distance, the actual body roll decreases. So without stiffening the car, lowering the car, or doing anything, this is something that you can take advantage of that just innately reduces body roll by shifting the weight and dynamics of your car to where you want them to be. So what dictates your roll center? Well, primarily how low your car is. Of course, when you lower your car, it lowers your center of gravity, but it also changes the angles of your suspension components. And this is where people talk about, well, if you're going to lower your car, you want to correct the suspension geometry so you don't have, any potential downsides. So what we like to look at is the relationship between your lower control arm and either your upper control arm on cars that have them, or in our case, since we have a McPherson strut suspension, it's related to the angle of your coilover suspension. So you're basically going to do a lot of math and geometry here. I won't go into too much detail so I don't bore you guys, but you basically cross the lines between the angle of your control arm and the perpendicular line to your suspension, and that helps determine where your roll center is. Now, the rule of thumb is you basically do not want to go past a level control arm, and that's the angle between this ball joint and this bushing. So you want this to stay at level or potentially going up towards the center of the car. If it starts going down, then this is actually angling your roll center potentially below the road. It can literally go underneath the ground. And so now your center of gravity is up here and your roll center is way down here. And that's going to induce a whole lot more body roll and actually reduce the performance and handling of your car. So this happens when you lower your car too much. And you can tell because if you go underneath your car, you can actually see your control arm is kind of at this downward angle. So that means that you've lowered it too much. And by correcting your suspension geometry, you can bring your control arms back square and level so that you at least keep your roll center up above the ground where you want it to be. So that's kind of the idea here. The way that SPL does it is they put spacers on top of the ball joint. So when you mount it, instead of it fitting all the way up inside of your knuckle, those spacers are going to hold the control arm down, which basically changes this angle and brings the roll center up higher and closer to your center of gravity. So I know that was a lot of information. If you guys look up roll center, there's a lot of other videos that help explain it as well. But the good news is the SPL arms are adjustable. They have different spacers that you can stack up and raise that roll center to improve your handling and reduce your body roll without stiffening your sway bars or your suspension or anything else. It just kind of does it dynamically by changing your suspension geometry. Now, the other thing that you get to take advantage of is reducing one of the biggest downsides of a McPherson strut suspension. Most people say that it's not very desirable because when you're going through a turn, your suspension is going to compress, get to that point where it's level, and then as it goes up even higher, you're actually losing camber. So all that camber that you added to your car that you want on your car to help you get through turns, now as you push through a turn really hard and really compress the suspension, you're actually going into potentially even positive camber, which is not what you want. It's turning that wheel in the wrong direction and putting you on the edge of your tires. So by correcting your roll center and lowering this control arm, it increases how much your suspension can compress before you get to that point where you begin losing camber. So there's more room for the suspension to compress without the control arm going to a downward angle. So it's really nice to have, especially from a handling perspective, because again, now you can go through turns faster and maintain your camber so that you have as much grip as possible. But even on my 440, where I originally installed them, a big benefit is now if the wheel compresses, I'm not going to rub, because instead of the wheel going into positive camber and pushing the wheel out towards the fender, it's cambering in and maintaining the clearances that I want. And that's one of the little things that, you know, people do with really lowered cars so that they can avoid rubbing issues and things like that. But yeah, overall, I think the SPL control arms are an amazing upgrade, something that we don't talk about enough. Like I said, I posted a video about it years ago, and a lot of you guys ended up buying them from that video. So I just wanted to talk about it again and give a little more detail on how those control arms work. I will have links to the control arm options in the video description. They sell them for F30s, F80s, G20s, G80s, you know, kind of take your pick. So definitely consider going that route and let them know I sent you if you do decide to place an order. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.